In this particular case, it's a new old stock head. So it's this is a base size piston, right? The standard piston size, you could say, 44 millimeter. So yeah, I've set my ring in there, and I set it in. Then I got the piston, and I run the piston up from the bottom to square up the piston ring to make sure, you know, it's mostly square in there, right? So it's not deformed. Then I get my feeler gauges and I set them in here, and this particular one, this feeler gauge is 10 thou, and it's firm going, a little firm going in. We'll go to 11 thou and see, yeah, 11 thou is getting firmer. And 12 thou, okay, this was the actual bigger one, my bad. There's two different ones. So this is the 13 thou, between 13 and 12 thou, right? So the calculations online say your top ring should be the tighter one and your bottom ring should be the looser one. So this piston ring in the bore is 10 thou. So I'm going to put this one on the top. This one, as you just saw, is like 13 thou. So I'm going to put that one on the bottom because it's looser, right? I want the higher one at the top. And you just buy these feeler gauges, right? That's obviously 13 thou. You could use millimeters if you want to, but I ain't gonna. I have them upside down for you. So basically, the online calculation said that it's 4 thousandths of an inch for every inch of cylinder bore, right? So what you do is you multiply 4 thou times your cylinder bore. In this case, it's 44 millimeters, and I obviously just used inches. So I multiplied 1.721 times 0.004, and you get about 6 thousandths of an inch. So our gap for the top ring on this case is 10 thou, and the bottom one is like 13 thou, so I'm already over looser than what it's supposed to be by quite a bit, if I'm interpreting this right. So my engine obviously isn't going to, once it warms up, overheat, because these ring gaps are bigger than they should be, so there's no filing required. But if you needed to, you could get a fingernail file and, you know, close it up on there and sand it, you know, file it basically. That is another bike starting up that you hear, which this one will be running to. So that's kind of the summary with the head. Now, in our next video, we're going to film the lapping of this head. This one may not be as bad, but other ones I had were really bad, and you can see the way they stamped this, not very good. But we're going to go ahead and lap that surface, and I'll show you how I do that. You don't have to do it, but I want to maximize my compression, and yeah, that's where I'm at and what I'm doing. You don't have to. Maybe this is an extreme unnecessary need, but I have 2 pieces of sandpaper. I'm starting out with 120 grit by the Lux, obviously coarser. Then I'm going to 220 for the final. Now what I'm using here is not just any piece of glass, but it's actually like a lapping glass. So this glass is perfectly flat, I suppose, in theory. There's the part number. It's probably $10. Tempered, better glass. It's supposed to be flat, obviously, right? X001 FE8 HPV. But you can look it up online. It's called like lapping glass, I think. Maybe not. Obviously, usually sometimes there's cast iron tables, which I've used before. But in this case, we're using glass because it's cheap. It's flat glass, right? It's that special kind of glass. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm starting with a cylinder, and I'm going to put it on here. And I'm going to try to film this. Obviously, I don't have the best setup for filming. No tripod. But I'll just give you the gist of it. So I use my left hand to hold the sandpaper straight. And then I just kind of, you know, move the head around, keeping it flat, right? You don't want her tipping. And that's lapping the surface, right? So hold it with your left hand and that's just, we're making sure this is flat, right? I'm going to be doing that for the next half hour. I'll check in with you here in a second. Probably not half hour. But as we do that, you're eventually going to see where the high points were. Anyway, like I said, this is probably extreme, but it is good to do, right? It's pretty cheap. Piece of sandpaper. And I'll check in with you in a second. Hold on. So, you're probably going to be able to see on the camera there's really bright shiny spots here. Look, it's all dark here, shiny here, shiny here, darker in here, dark, lighter here. So you can see there was high points, right? So this wasn't flat truly, but like I said, this probably isn't necessary, but it's going to help with the seal and compression, which we'll be doing a compression test, that's for sure. This plus 210 thing is the part number, and then you can see the poorly stamped Benelli. Yeah, part numbers, stamps probably shouldn't be on the sealing surfaces, but what do I know, right? They should have put it on one of the side here. Anyway, after about another minute or two, you can see the ring. There's a black ring still, but you can see all the rest of this is getting flusher and flusher. And this is just a couple minutes of sanding it with this lapping glass. So you can see it's going to be a much flatter surface. Like I said, whether that's needed, I don't know, but it's going to help, right? It's going to be better than what it was, but may not be needed, but I'm doing it, like I said, so you don't have to, but yeah. Okay, now you can probably see it's almost there. I'm going to hit this up a little bit more with this coarser grit. Then I'm going to squirt oil on this. I'm just using some motor oil, whatever, as a lubricant. Wet sanding, you could call it, oil sanding. And then I'm going to use this finer grit to finish off, which is probably not even needed either, but I'm going to do it. So yeah. So checking back in, one thing that'll help you if you actually wipe the surface, right, with a paper towel. And you can see that this area in here, right, that smaller ring, that's still not flat, but we're getting there. Rapidly approaching now, right? So stick with the coarse sandpaper until that's gone if you wish, or, go as far as you want. Anyway, this was just the process showing you what I'm doing. So, yep. We're probably going to notice, you're going to notice a pretty big difference here, right? There's that black ring's pretty much gone. So you notice that somebody stamped the damn line there, but it doesn't fully connect to the cylinder wall, but why would you do that? Not good. So I would actually start off with 80 grit. I'm going to have an amendment here. Go 80 grit to get the black ring gone. And then go to 120. Then go to 220. That's my advice. And you'll end up with a surface like this, which is pretty good. I'm still going to hit this up more with the finer grit to smooth it out some more, but probably overkill. But anyway, as you can see, it's a world of difference. The bees, or some of the bees are gone. Like you could see Benelli really profoundly before. But it did wear it away a little bit, but that's expected, right? Because that's what we were doing. So I soaked this head in some gasoline. Probably should have used some other solvent. Even engine degreaser doesn't even clean these. But obviously, the reason why I want to sand these heads and get it flat is because obviously this little buzzer, and all of them have this problem, is they barf out carbon shit everywhere, right? So that's the gist of it. So I'm attempting to clean this up, but it's a bear, to say the least. Look at it. This is actually a lot cleaner than what it was. But then we're going to sand this and clean that carbon out too, and sand this, right, to get it flat. This one actually looks better than others I had, but that's a little bit of a mess up there. But you can see there's like grind marks there. So yeah, here is my head. I just wire wheeled as much as I could, but you can see deep in here, that stuff is just so baked on. Even scraping it with a razor blade still leaves that surface, as you see deep in there. This one I scraped with a razor blade, but obviously these other ones I haven't, but it's extremely tough. I was going to have these parts vapor honed, but which is like wet media blasting, but the guy never came. Ugh, look at all that. I'll try to keep scraping some more, but then we're going to be doing the same sanding grit on that. So the next clip you'll see I would have sanded this to make this look better. This surface is pretty horrible on this one. So yeah, that's just okay. So after cleaning up those surfaces, we're getting closer and closer. I'm going to take a razor blade to this surface just to clean it up. I know it looks pretty dirty, but it's mostly clean. So this particular buzzer has a different connecting rod out of a newer engine. Hence why it has the roller bearings here. The bronze one's fine, but this roller one was available, so I bought it. And I believe it's everything the same on it, because it goes in a more modern engine. Hence why, not modern, too modern, still like 75 probably. It's now we put those piston rings on in the order I mentioned in the other video. This cutout on the piston, I believe, goes on the top side. I'll confirm that in a minute or two. But we have our wrist pin and our piston rings installed. Obviously, we measured our piston gap way earlier in the video, so yeah. So the next step I would recommend doing is putting in one of these snap rings in whatever side you want. Like I said, the piston goes up that way because this porting is near the carb. Then put the piston in the toaster oven at like 200 degrees and put the wrist pin in the freezer for like 20 minutes because my pin is tight in here. Supposedly somebody warped their piston from hammering in the pin, right? So that's just a tip to do to make the installation easier. Then this wrist pin will slide right in easily. So yeah, and obviously this snap ring will stop it from going too far. So you'll be able to shove it in all the way. And I'd recommend just putting your rings in first too. But I'm going to throw this in the toaster oven for like 20 minutes and we'll be back. Socket as a plan B in case I had to tap the wrist pin through. Which wrist pin actually slid in mostly by hand. Then I did push it all the way through and tap it with the hammer a little tiny bit. But obviously it is in now. So my next step is to get this gasket, and we're going to go ahead and rub, RTV all over it like this. That way there is an excessive squeeze out that's not needed. And we'll slap that on. Then we'll do the same thing with this gasket, rub red RTV on it in a high temp, and put that on. And then we'll tighten, obviously, the 4 nuts. I also like to tap on the head with a rubber mallet just to seat everything, right? And then tighten the nuts accordingly. Crisscross. So that's where we're at. Yeah, almost coming together. Okay, I think this is the end video for today, but I put the red RTV right thinnest layer between this one and that one. And then what I do is I whap this. Don't hit your spark plug, right? Just to kind of help. And then obviously I actually did torque it to 7.5 inch-pounds. So obviously my engine's trying to move, but I'm not even filming. My camera is completely off, but I was trying to film this. But I just torqued it to 7.5 foot-pounds. 7.5 foot-pounds, I repeat. And I whap it with the rubber hammer because I think it helps seep it. And now, unfortunately, I have to wait 24 hours for this to do. Now, I did have a hard time with my piston rings, actually, and I had to use this little awl and a screwdriver to help push them in. And my brother helped, obviously, because it was a 2-man operation. I'm just going to try to set this to film me turning over the engine now to see how it sounds. I'll just rotate it around here. See how it sounds. Oh, wow, yeah, that's got a lot of compression. God, yeah, that's a big improvement over before. So we'll see what compression it actually has when I get a compression gauge.